With summer just around the corner, today we're going to make some fun and cheery fruit-themed DIYs. Stay tuned. I'm Rebecca Virginia, and today I'll be showing you my favorite fruit-themed DIYs from 2021. Let's get started. The first DIY in today's video is a mason jar watermelon sign. This bright DIY is the perfect welcoming decor piece for your front door. Here are all of the supplies that you'll need to make this on your own. Starting off with our watermelon mason jar welcome sign, I taped out this section of the mason jar. You could just freehand it if you want to, but I am not the cleanest of painters, so I decided to start with painter's tape. And I took the shade Berry Red by Apple Barrel, and then for the top section of our mason jar, which is supposed to be the lid, I took the shade Elephant by Waverly in the Waverly chalk paint and painted the top. Because I wanted the bottom of our mason jar to have a curved edge, it's really hard to create a curve with painter's tape. So this part I did freehand, and you'll see me go back and forth a couple times throughout this project with painter's tape and freehanding. I love the clean edges of the painter's tape, but again, it's just really hard to get that to curve. And right now I am creating the rind of our watermelon. Again, you can see me go in with the painter's tape and try to see if I could make it work. And the first shade of green that I used was the shade Palmetto by Delta Creative. And then the one that I'm going in with now is called Celery by Waverly. And then lastly, I just used the shade Green by Apple Barrel, and that is going to be the main end of our watermelon. Now that the initial colors are all set on the mason jar, it's time to start adding the little details and some shading. So I'm going in with my really fine point detailing tool and some black paint and just adding definition to the top of our mason jar lid. I outlined the lid with black paint, and then I went in with a fine point paintbrush and some white paint to highlight some of the areas. So I'm making some white lines just where the black added definition. We're now adding the light white to highlight. And now I'm adding in all of these little details on our sign. So I took that really small detailing tool and some white paint, and I just created, I guess I would call them squiggles, just little squiggles of varying lengths all along the curved edges of our watermelon rind. Then I'm just adding a few more details to the bottom watermelon rind section of the mason jar. So along here, I'm just putting little white polka dots kind of at different angles. And then on the lower dark green section of our watermelon rind, I'm taking my same tool and white paint and making little trio clusters of white dots along the bottom. For the welcome part of my sign, I decided to make a stencil out of some Oracle vinyl. I will have the kind that I use linked below. And I decided to use a stencil rather than a vinyl decal because everything in my sign was paint, and I thought it would look a little weird if I had some shiny vinyl also on the sign. So I decided to just make a stencil and then go over it with some Waverly white chalk paint. And then I'm just using my little Cricut weeding tool to get out any other little bits of the stencil. And last part pretty much is making the seeds for our watermelon. So I just took a small paintbrush and some black paint and just freehanded on some watermelon seeds. The sign already came with this jute hanger, so I went ahead and just placed that back in the sign to act as the hanger. As the last final touch, I added in a raffia bow and then just trimmed it down to size. After adding the bow, your watermelon sign is all ready to be displayed. You can always make this sign with different types of fruit. I think lemon, kiwi, and even strawberry would look great. Our second DIY is a watermelon glass. This is a really simple DIY that uses very few supplies. Here are those that you'll need to recreate this DIY on your own. For this next project, we are going to be using one of these stemless wine glasses that I got from the Dollar Tree. And then I took some paint. This is the Cermacoat paint in the shade Watermelon, so very fitting. And I did dilute it in water. I don't want this to be opaque. I want it to be, I guess, kind of like a stain. So I diluted the paint a lot in water and then just brushed it on. To create the watermelon rind effect on our stemless wine glass, I am taking one of my favorite supplies ever to use, and that is jute. And I am just wrapping this around the wine glass. It's a little bit tricky at first when you're working with the bottom of it, but then once you get to more of the center part of the wine glass, it's really easy to just wrap all around. While I was adding the jute, I noticed that some of the paint was chipping off of my wine glass. And to prevent this from happening, I took some of this dishwasher safe Mod Podge. It really seals in the paint and makes it basically waterproof. So I added this on, and this helped prevent my paint from chipping. And also, because this is a drinking glass, I'm going to be hand washing it with soap and water before and after use. So this will really help make it waterproof. Today's video is really highlighting all of these amazing plaid products. Plaid owns Folk Art, Apple Barrel, Mod Podge, Waverly. They have so many amazing items, and I am a plaid ambassador for them. They're not paying me to promote any of their products, but they did very kindly send me a lot of the paints that I'm using today for this watermelon video. One of them being this holly green color that I'm using to paint over the jute. This is going to be the bottom section of our watermelon rind. So I'm going ahead and painting all of the jute in this green color. Now I'm using my detailing tool and some black paint and drawing on our watermelon seeds. I started off a little too tiny on the seeds, so I had to make them a little bit bigger, but it's better to start off small, then you can always go in and add more paint. And I just added them at diagonals all the way around our watermelon glass. I absolutely love how this DIY came out, and I cannot wait to be sipping out of this fun cup all summer long. The last DIY in today's video is a super easy one that would be great to do with kids or those who aren't as fluent in crafting, because it's basically just sponge painting. Here's how you can recreate this on your own. This would be such a fun DIY to do with kids because it's really easy and we're basically just doing some sponge painting. So I took a sponge from the Dollar Tree, they come 2 a pack, and I just cut out a triangle shape, and then for the rind of our watermelon slice, I just cut out a long rectangle shaped piece of sponge, and I kind of cut it a little bit more so it was slightly curved. This is pretty difficult to do with the sponge, and it ends up looking fine regardless, but I did curve it a tiny bit. Now I am taking my napkins, and all that I did was push the sponge into some red paint and started placing down my watermelon triangles. And when I was completely done with this, I ended up liking that one way better where it had less paint. So since these are Dollar Tree napkins, I think I got like 50 in a pack, so I scrapped that one and decided to go with a little less paint on my sponge. And I really liked the way that these came out even better, where it wasn't completely opaque and it kind of had that speckled effect, and I went all over the napkin with this red sponge. Learning from my experience with the red paint, I didn't completely load up my sponge with green paint, just a little bit, because again, I still wanted the napkin to show through and it to have that kind of speckled sponge painting effect. And then I just went over top of our red triangles, leaving a little bit of space so that there is the white napkin and shows, you know, the natural white of watermelon rind, and then just put the green on top. My last finishing touch for our watermelon napkins was to add the seeds. So again, I just took my detailing tool and some black paint and went ahead and did 2 rows of seeds and staggered them a little bit so they weren't in perfect straight lines. These napkins would be the perfect decor for a summer barbecue, or if you're hosting a children's party and need an activity for everyone to do, this is a really fun and easy one. My next DIY uses a piece of foam core board that you can find in the school supply section at the Dollar Tree and transforms it into a faux shiplap farmhouse sign. Here's what you need to make it. I used a calendar image from the Simply Blessed Dollar Tree calendars, but you could use a different calendar image or just a different image or a poster that you have. I glued it down onto my foam core board and then I cut it out using a box cutter. My calendar image that I'm using already had distressed wood lines in it, so I'm not measuring, I'm just following exactly those lines in my calendar image, and I am using this ruler just to make sure that I cut straight. Also going to need 2 extra pieces of foam core board, so I'm just using the images that I already cut out as a guide to cut out 2 more. Then I am painting those 2 foam core pieces that I just cut out completely brown, and the back of our sign brown. I also took some of that dark brown paint and a stippling brush just to distress all the way around my sign to really give it that farmhouse look. Once my paint had dried, it was time to put my backing, I will call them support pieces, on the back of my sign. And I flipped them over and I had to be careful and double check because you want to make sure that you don't accidentally flip it upside down when you are doing this. And then I just eyeballed the space in between the signs. If you wanted to measure it, you definitely could. And I placed down a little bit of tape just so that my shiplap pieces wouldn't be moving around. And then I hot glued down those 2 support pieces that we had just cut out earlier out of the foam core board. And now my sign is nicely held into place. I love the look of the faux shiplap and that those 2 brown support pieces were just peeking through, but I still thought my sign needed a little something extra, so I added on some black and white gingham ribbon to the top and bottom. I'll be using jute to hang up my faux shiplap sign, but to make it a little different than the usual jute hanger, I wrapped it around the edges of that top faux shiplap or foam core board 5 times, and then I turned it into a hanger and very professionally used my scissors to hold down where I wanted it to hang. And then I wrapped around 5 times on the other side as well before securing it in place with some hot glue. I ended up doing a small burlap bow and then a double loop finger bow out of jute, and I placed that on top. I really like the look that it added. I know it's a little bit more rustic farmhouse than traditional farmhouse, but I couldn't help but add some burlap and jute into this DIY.
Today's video is part of the open playlist 5 under $5 DIY challenge. This is hosted by Farm Charm Chic and Crafty Cove DIY. Please make sure to click the link to the playlist down below in the description box to check out everyone else's DIY videos. Closing out this video with another lemon DIY where I'll show you how to make your own floral arrangement. But I also wanted to mention that I have another lemon video. I will link it above and in the description box down below if you want to check it out.
I'm starting off with 2 bottles that I got from the Dollar Tree. I've said this before, but they are actually iced coffee bottles. They're the only glass bottles of iced coffee that I've seen sold in the Dollar Tree, and again, they're amazing for crafting and really delicious, so definitely pick them up if you see them. I painted them entirely in yellow, but I left the upper about quarter of the bottle plain. Then I'm going in with some white paint and just decorating the top. The top was still looking a little bit plain to me. I didn't like it just with the white paint only. So I wrapped the entire top area of the bottle in jute, and then I'm actually going back in with the white paint and painting over it. I liked the way the white paint looked, but I just wanted to add a little bit of texture and something slightly different, so that's why I went over it again with the paint. Then I kept going back and forth with the paint. I just couldn't make up my mind. I thought too much of the white paint made it kind of look like a milk bottle, and that was not the vibe that I was going for with this DIY. So I ended up adding a bit more of that yellow paint, and I thought about taping it out to really create a nice crisp line, but I was too scared that if I put down painter's tape, it might actually peel some of that white paint off of glass. Painter's tape's a little tricky when you're using glass, so I just freehanded it. Then I made these cute little labels that say pucker up and squeeze the day, just using plain yellow cardstock and this really fun lemon cardstock that I found at Hobby Lobby. And I just took a glue stick to glue them together, and I really liked the way they came out. I thought it was super cute having the patterned scrapbooking paper peeking out from behind that yellow one. I tied them with a piece of jute and then just hot glued that onto our crate. I also completely forgot to film this, but I did paint the crate white using some Waverly chalk paint. And then I took a longer strip of that same lemon scrapbooking paper from Hobby Lobby and just created a little border on the crate. I didn't want it to be plain white, and I thought the paper was so pretty, I just had to use it again. Also, if you can't find lemons at the Dollar Tree, just take some Easter eggs, add some paint, and you've got lemons. Now we've got our crate, our bottles, our Easter egg lemons. Now we need to create some floral arrangements. If you're really bad at creating floral arrangements, don't worry, I have got you with a little trick. What you're gonna do is take a floral arrangement from the Dollar Tree and we're just gonna kind of start taking it apart. I didn't like how large some of these yellow flowers were, so I took the backs off and about 2 layers of the petals, and then I put the backs back onto the flowers. Now the floral arrangement we had earlier from the Dollar Tree is pretty much all taken apart. We just have one lone yellow flower left on it. And what I'm gonna do is start taking some other flowers that I really like. I thought these daisies were super pretty, and I also took a bunch of these smaller white flowers. And now that I have all of my flower pieces, I'm going to begin arranging them on that blank arrangement exactly how I want. If you remember, this was just a floral arrangement of these yellow flowers, but since I have taken some off, I am now free to add an arrangement how I like, again adding a little bit of that daisy and the larger white flower. And then I took my Easter egg lemon, which actually worked easier than the Dollar Tree lemons because there's already a hole in it. And all of a sudden, instead of just a plain yellow flower arrangement, I now have one with lots of different variations of greenery, flowers, and even a lemon. I had leftover foam Easter eggs from the Dollar Tree, which I painted into a lemon. So then I took one of these floral picks that I had popped the flower off and just stuck that into my styrofoam lemon and then added it into my arrangement towards the front. I repeated the exact same process with my other jar, filling it with flowers and some of my faux lemons. Then as a final touch, I made a little bow for the front of them using some gingham ribbon. I hope this DIY was especially helpful for those of you who requested more floral arranging DIYs. I will definitely be doing more specific floral arranging in the future, but this is a really quick trick that I love using when I am in a pinch, and it's great for beginners, but I promise I will have more floral arranging in future videos.
Thanks for watching. I'll be back next Thursday with a new video filled with brand new DIYs for 2022. Until next time, keep searching, keep creating.